It was a Sunday like any other, which for Elena Petrova meant it was a blur of bleach, tired muscles, and the quiet hum of a floor polisher. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing a stubborn coffee stain from the plush, cream-colored carpet of a penthouse office, the scent of lemon cleaner sharp in her nostrils. Her world was this 10-foot radius of carpet, the city of Eldoria a glittering, indifferent jewel outside the panoramic window. Just as she finally worked the last of the brown stain out, her phone, an old model with a spiderweb of cracks across the screen, buzzed violently in her pocket. It was a call from her son's school, a call that never brought good news. Her heart seized, a cold knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She answered, her voice a little breathless. The school nurse's words were a jumble of clinical terms and forced calm, but 3 words sliced through the noise. Leo. Collapsed. Hospital. In that instant, the gleaming office, the city lights, and the smell of lemon cleaner all vanished. Her world, already so fragile, simply shattered. How much can one person endure before they are lost completely? Elena Petrova had not always lived a life measured in scrubbed floors and bargain bin groceries. There was a time, before, when her world was filled with the scent of oil paints and turpentine, her hands stained with cadmium red and cerulean blue instead of harsh chemicals. She had been an artist, her small apartment overflowing with canvases that captured the fiery sunsets over the Eldorian Sea and the soulful eyes of strangers she met on the street. Her dream wasn't fame or fortune, but simply to make a living from the vibrant world she created with her brush, to fill her days with color and light. Her son Leo was the center of that colorful world, a bright, curious boy with his father's warm eyes and her own stubborn chin. He was her greatest masterpiece, her most profound source of joy. But life, as it so often does, had other plans. Leo's father, a man who had promised her a lifetime of shared canvases and quiet mornings, had left when Leo was just a toddler, the promises dissolving like watercolor in the rain. The departure left a wound in Elena's heart that never quite healed, a quiet ache of abandonment that she buried deep beneath layers of maternal duty. The dream of being an artist was packed away, canvas by canvas, replaced by the stark reality of needing to provide. Art couldn't pay the rent. Art couldn't fill Leo's perpetually empty stomach. So, Elena traded her brushes for a bucket and mop, her vibrant palette for the monotonous gray of a cleaner's uniform. Her days became a grueling marathon of bus rides and back-breaking labor, cleaning the pristine, soulless offices of the city's elite. She moved through these opulent spaces like a ghost, invisible to the powerful people who left behind coffee rings and careless smudges. Her own life felt like a smudge, something to be wiped away and forgotten. Yet, through it all, there was Leo. Every sacrifice was for him. The cheap, cramped apartment they called home was filled with his laughter. The meager meals she managed to put on the table were eaten together, their small kitchen table a sanctuary from the harshness of the world. She would listen to him talk about his day at school, his eyes shining with excitement as he described a science experiment or a story he'd read. In those moments, watching the light in her son's face, Elena would feel a flicker of the old color return to her world. She would tell herself it was enough. This was her purpose now. Her unfulfilled dream was a ghost that haunted her late at night, a whisper of what could have been. But then the morning would come, and the need to survive would shout louder than any why. Spur. She loved Leo with a ferocity that was both her greatest strength and her most vulnerable weakness. He was the reason she kept going, the reason she scrubbed floors until her knuckles were raw, the reason she swallowed her pride day after day. He was her everything, the one perfect, beautiful thing in her worn-out life. The hospital was a sterile white maze of anxiety. Elena ran through the corridors, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, the school nurse's words echoing in her mind. She found Leo's room and burst in, her eyes immediately finding his small form on the bed, looking impossibly fragile against the stark white sheets. He was pale, so pale, with an IV drip attached to his small hand. A doctor, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, met her with a gentle but serious expression. Mrs. Petrova, she began, her voice soft. Leo has a rare congenital heart condition. It's been asymptomatic until now, but the collapse today was a major event. He needs surgery, a very specialized, very expensive surgery. The word expensive landed like a physical blow, knocking the air from Elena's lungs. She looked at the estimated cost Dr. Sharma had written on a piece of paper, and the number was so astronomical, so far beyond her reality, it might as well have been written in a foreign language. It was more money than she could hope to earn in 10 lifetimes of scrubbing floors. Despair, cold and suffocating, washed over her. She spent the next few days in a daze, a ghost haunting the hospital hallways. She watched Leo sleep, his breathing shallow, and felt a helplessness so profound it was a physical ache. She called the insurance company, only to be met with a wall of bureaucratic indifference and a litany of clauses and exceptions that all meant the same thing. They wouldn't cover it. She begged the hospital for a payment plan, but the amount was simply too large. Every door she knocked on was slammed shut in her face. One evening, utterly defeated, she returned to her cleaning job at the Royal Administrative Tower. She had to keep working. She couldn't afford to lose the one meager source of income she had. As she emptied the trash in a lavish top-floor office, her eyes fell upon a newspaper left on the desk. The headline was about the Crown Prince of Eldoria, Prince Alaric, who was heading a new philanthropic initiative for public health. There was a picture of him, a man with a serious face and kind eyes, not unlike the ones she used to love to paint. A desperate, wild idea began to form in her mind. It was insane, impossible, but what other choice did she have? The next day, she found out the prince would be visiting the very building she cleaned. Security was heightened, and all non-essential staff were told to stay out of the main atrium. But Elena, armed with a mother's desperation, was not non-essential. Her mission was the most essential thing in the world. She tucked a small folded note into her pocket, a note on which she had poured out her story, her love for Leo, and her desperate plea for help. She knew the risks. She could be fired, arrested. But the image of Leo, pale and still in his hospital bed, eclipsed all fear. As the official procession moved through the atrium, a sea of dark suits and polished shoes, Elena saw her chance. Prince Alaric was at the center of the entourage, listening intently to a man in a gray suit. He looked taller in person, more imposing, but there was a gentleness in his posture that gave her a sliver of hope. Taking a deep breath, she slipped past a distracted security guard, her cleaner's uniform, her camouflage. "Your Highness," she called out, her voice trembling but clear. Heads snapped in her direction. The men in suits immediately moved to block her, their faces a mixture of shock and annoyance. A large security guard grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. "That's enough, madam. Come with me." But Prince Alaric raised a hand, his voice calm and authoritative. "Wait. Let her speak." The guards hesitated, then stepped back. All eyes were on her. The silence in the vast atrium was deafening. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she looked directly at the prince, her gaze unwavering. "Your Highness," she said, her voice gaining strength, "my name is Elena Petrova. My son Leo is in the hospital. He needs a heart surgery that I can't afford. I know this is not the place, but I am a desperate mother. I have nowhere else to turn." She fumbled in her pocket and held out the crumpled note. "Please," she whispered, tears finally breaking free and streaming down her cheeks. "He is my whole world." Prince Alaric stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He bypassed the guards and took the note directly from her hand. He didn't open it. Instead, he looked into her eyes, and for a long moment, he just looked. He saw not just a cleaner who had broken protocol, but a mother in agony. He saw the raw, unfiltered desperation and a strength that defied her circumstances. He gave a curt nod to one of his aides, a sharp-looking man named Julian. "Get her details," the prince said, his voice quiet but firm, "and look into this matter personally. I want a full report on my desk by morning." He then turned back to Elena, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "We will look into it, Mrs. Petrova. Go be with your son." And with that, the procession moved on, leaving Elena standing alone in the middle of the atrium, the iron grip on her arm gone, a fragile, terrifying hope blooming in her chest. The next morning, as Elena sat by Leo's bedside, holes. Ding his small, cool hand, a man in an impeccably tailored suit entered the room. It was Julian, the prince's aide. He carried a tablet and had an air of quiet efficiency. Elena's heart leaped into her throat. "Mrs. Petrova," he began, his tone professional but not unkind. "His Highness asked me to follow up on your situation. We've spoken with Dr. Sharma. We understand the gravity of Leo's condition." He paused, and Elena held her breath. "The Crown Prince's Philanthropic Fund will be covering the full cost of Leo's surgery and all associated medical care." The words hung in the air, so monumental, so impossible that Elena couldn't process them at first. She just stared at him, her mind blank. You mean—" she stammered. "Yes," Julian confirmed with a small smile. "The surgery will be scheduled for as soon as possible. You don't have to worry about the cost anymore." Relief, so powerful and overwhelming, crashed over Elena in a tidal wave. The tension she had carried in her body for weeks, for years, finally snapped. She broke down, sobbing not with despair, but with a gratitude so profound it felt like a physical release. Through her tears she thanked Julian, thanked the prince, thanked a universe she had long believed had forgotten her. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. In the days leading up to it, something unexpected happened. Prince Alaric himself came to the hospital. He didn't come with an entourage or a press corps. He came alone, dressed in simple trousers and a sweater, looking less like a prince and more like a concerned friend. He found Elena in the hospital cafeteria, staring into a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. "Mrs. Petrova?" he asked softly. She looked up, shocked to see him there. "Your Highness," she said, quickly standing up. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. He sat down, and for a moment they were just two people in a sterile hospital cafeteria. "I wanted to see how you and Leo were doing," he said, "and I wanted to return this." He placed a small framed object on the table. It was a painting. Her painting. It was a small forgotten canvas she had done years ago, of a child looking up at the moon, his face full of wonder. It had been sold for a pittance to a second-hand shop to pay for a utility bill. "I bought this a few years ago," Alaric explained. "I was captivated by it. The emotion in the boy's face, the hope. It's been hanging in my private study ever since. When Julian gave me your file, your name was familiar. I realized you were the artist, E. Petrova." Elena stared at the painting, her own forgotten dreams staring back at her. Tears welled in her eyes. I had to give it up," she whispered, "to take care of Leo." "Art like this should not be given up," Alaric said gently. "The world needs this kind of beauty." They talked for over an hour. Elena, who had felt invisible for so long, found herself opening up to this powerful man. She told him about her dreams, her struggles, the quiet pain of her life. And he listened. He truly listened. He told her about the pressures of his own life, the gilded cage of royalty, the constant weight of duty. In that sterile cafeteria, an unlikely connection was forged, a bond built on shared vulnerability and mutual respect. The day of the surgery was the longest day of Elena's life. Alaric, true to his word, was there. He sat with her in the waiting room, not as a prince, but as a friend, offering quiet comfort and a steady presence. When Dr. Sharma finally came out, her face beaming, and said the words, "The surgery was a complete success," Elena felt her world right itself. Later, as she stood over Leo's bed, watching the steady, healthy rhythm of the heart monitor, Alaric saw Tude beside her. "He's going to be okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, he is," Alaric replied. He then turned to her, his expression serious. "Elena," he said, using her first name for the first time, "your ordeal is over, but I don't want this to be the end of our story. I want to offer you something more." He explained that his foundation was opening a new community arts center. He wanted her to run it. He wanted to give her a studio, supplies, a salary, everything she needed to paint again, not just as a hobby, but as her profession. He wanted to give her back the dream she had been forced to sacrifice. It was more than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just charity. It was a chance at a new life, a life where she could be both a mother and an artist. It was a life where she could finally be whole again. In that quiet hospital room, with her son sleeping peacefully and a prince offering her a future she thought was lost forever, Elena Petrova's transformation began. The reward wasn't just the money for the surgery. It was the rediscovery of her own worth, a truth she had long forgotten. The weeks that followed felt like a dream, from which Elena was afraid she might wake. Leo's recovery was remarkable. Color returned to his cheeks, and his laughter, stronger and more vibrant than ever, once again filled their lives. They moved out of the cramped, damp apartment and into a bright, airy home provided by the foundation, with a small garden in the back. For the first time in years, Elena didn't have to choose between paying the electricity bill and buying fresh fruit. The constant, grinding weight of poverty began to lift, and in its place, a sense of peace and security settled in. The most profound change, however, happened within Elena herself. The new arts center was a beautiful, light-filled space, and Alaric had been true to his word. A large private studio was waiting for her, stocked with every kind of paint, brush, and canvas she could imagine. The first time she walked into it, she simply stood in the middle of the room and cried. They were tears of joy, of disbelief, of coming home to a part of herself she thought was gone forever. At first, her hands felt clumsy, her connection to the canvas tenuous. The muscle memory was there, but the creative spirit was shy, hesitant to emerge after being dormant for so long. She started small, sketching Leo as he played in the garden, capturing the new light in his eyes. She painted the sunrise from her new bedroom window, the soft pinks and golds a stark contrast to the gray dawns she had known for years. Alaric was a frequent visitor to the center. He would often stop by her studio at the end of the day, sometimes with his aide Julian, but more often alone. Their conversations, which had started in the sterile confines of the hospital, now flowed easily, filled with laughter and a growing intimacy. He would watch her paint, fascinated by the way she could translate emotion into color and form. You see the world differently, Elena, he said one afternoon, watching her mix a complex shade of blue. You see the beauty in the ordinary things that most of us walk right past. I used to, she replied, not looking up from her palette. Then for a long time, I only saw the struggle. You helped me see the beauty again. Their bond deepened, evolving from friendship into something more. It was a slow, gentle progression, built on a foundation of shared vulnerability and deep respect. He fell in love not with a damsel in distress he had rescued, but with the strong, resilient artist who had fought for her son with every fiber of her being. She fell in love not with a prince, but with the kind, thoughtful man who saw her when she felt invisible, who valued her talent, and who listened to the quiet whispers of her heart. One evening, he took her to a private royal gala, dressed. In an elegant gown that Alaric had gifted her, Elena felt like she was in a fairy tale. But as she walked into the grand ballroom on his arm, she wasn't intimidated by the opulence or the scrutinizing eyes of the kingdom's elite. The woman who had once scrubbed floors in anonymity now stood with quiet confidence, her worth not defined by the prince at her side, but by the strength she had discovered within herself. She was no longer just a cleaner, a struggling single mother. She was Elena Petrova, an artist, a mother, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. The relationship wasn't without its challenges. The palace and the public were abuzz with gossip about the Crown Prince and the mysterious commoner, but Alaric was steadfast. He protected her from the harsh glare of the public eye, his commitment to her unwavering. He introduced her to his family, not as a project, but as the woman he loved. Slowly, the world around them began to adjust to this new reality, to this unlikely love story that had captured the heart of their future king. A year passed. The Arts Center flourished under Elena's guidance, becoming a vibrant hub for the community, a place where children from all walks of life could discover the magic of creation, just as she had. Her own work had gained recognition, her paintings celebrated for their emotional depth and raw honesty. She had an exhibition, her first ever, and it was a resounding success. Critics lauded her as a powerful new voice in the art world. But her greatest masterpiece remained her life with Leo. He was thriving, healthy, happy, and surrounded by love. One crisp autumn afternoon, Elena was in her studio, putting the finishing touches on a new painting. It was a portrait of Alaric, but not in his royal regalia. It was Alaric as she knew him best, sitting in a simple chair, a book in his lap, a soft, contemplative look on his face. The painting captured his kindness, his quiet strength, the soul she had fallen in love with. Alaric entered the studio quietly, not wanting to disturb her. He watched her for a moment, a soft smile on his face. "It's finished," she said, sensing his presence. She turned to him, a smudge of ultramarine blue on her cheek. He walked over and gently wiped the paint away with his thumb. "It's beautiful, Elena," he said, his eyes on the portrait. "You've captured me." "I painted what I see," she replied softly. He took her hand, his gaze warm and full of love. "Elena Petrova," he began, his voice serious. "A year ago, you ran up to me in an atrium, a desperate mother willing to do anything for her child. You changed my life that day. You showed me what true strength and courage look like. You taught me how to see the world through your eyes, to find the beauty in the simple, quiet moments." He knelt down on one knee, right there in the paint-splattered studio, a prince kneeling before an artist. He held out a small velvet box. "I don't want to be your benefactor or your protector anymore," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to be your partner, in everything. I want to build a life with you and Leo. Elena, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Elena's face as she looked from the man kneeling before her to the life they had already begun to build. A life filled with love, art, and a peace she had never thought possible. It was a life that was more beautiful than any canvas she could ever paint. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with a happiness so pure, so profound, it filled every corner of her soul. "Yes." It was a Tuesday, but it was nothing like the Tuesdays that had once defined Elena's existence. The morning sun streamed into a warm, spacious kitchen that smelled of coffee and fresh pastries. A healthy, vibrant Leo was at the table, chattering excitedly about a school project, his laughter echoing through the room. Elena stood at the counter, not with a scrub brush in her hand, but with a cup of tea, watching her son. Alaric walked in, already dressed for his royal duties, but he stopped, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and rested his chin on her shoulder. He kissed her cheek, his touch gentle and familiar. They stood there for a moment in silence, a family, watching the ordinary, beautiful chaos of a morning unfold. Her life was no longer a struggle for survival, but a tapestry woven with threads of love, purpose and profound gratitude. She was a wife, a mother, a celebrated artist, and a future queen, but in these quiet moments she was simply Elena, a woman who had found her way back to the light. Her story became a quiet legend in Eldoria, a testament to the fact that life's greatest transformations often begin not with a grand gesture, but with a single, desperate act of love. It served as a reminder that within every ordinary person there is an extraordinary strength waiting to be discovered, and that true wealth is not measured in crowns or castles, but in the courage to fight for who you love, and the grace to accept the love you deserve. Sometimes, the most beautiful art isn't found on a canvas, but in the resilient, colorful, and breathtaking masterpiece of a life rebuilt from its broken pieces.